Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us and welcome to our Canadian Food Focus webinar series. I'm Dorothy Long, Director of Communications for Canadian Food Focus and the host for today's webinar. For those of you not familiar with Canadian Food Focus, it is a place where you can explore how food is grown and raised here in Canada, maybe try a new recipe using Canadian ingredients, or even find useful advice from our expert contributors to help you feel more confident about your food choices. I encourage you to check out our website, canadianfoodfocus.org. It features articles and videos that follow Canadian ingredients from farm to table. It is organized into sections including In the Kitchen, Recipes, Health Information, Canadian Food Stories, On the Farm Information, as well as a What's in Season section and a new Learn to Cook area. All of our content is developed by food and farming experts, including ranchers, farmers, dietitians, home economists, and chefs. But let's get started with today's webinar. Today we have Amber Johnson, Director of Marketing and Communications with the Saskatchewan Pulse Growers and Lentils.org. Amber's job is to increase awareness of lentils, and as such, she works with many chefs and culinary innovators to come up with new and exciting ways to use lentils. Hi, Amber. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Dorothy. Thanks for having me.
So today you're going to share with us some, as the title says, some creative ways to use healthy, sustainable, and delicious lentils that go way beyond soup. I think everybody on this webinar today probably loves lentils already and is looking forward to your tasty suggestions and also learning a bit more about why lentils are such a sustainable choice. So I will let you get started, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for a few questions. And so take it away. And if you do have any questions, please put them in the chat and we'll go from there. So take it away, Amber.
Great. Thanks, Dorothy. And thanks again for having me today. I know I see some familiar names in the comment bar already. So good to see some of you who I've met before and great to meet those of you who are joining us here for the first time. We've done work under the Lentils.org or previously Canadian Lentils brand in Canada for many years, working with dietitians, chefs, and food influencers. Now, today, our program is mainly focused on food service outreach work in the U.S., but this is a great way, and we do rely on Canadian Food Focus's efforts to really continue that conversation in Canada with those food influencers, and this is one of the ways that we look to do that. So we'll dive right in today. I've got lots of slides. For those of you who's around lunchtime or creeping up to it, you're welcome for the delicious food photos. I hope you're all hungry when we get finished here today. But what we're going to cover, we're going to dive in first and foremost just some production and sustainability information to ground, why lentils are sustainable. Many folks know that they inherently are, but we'll put some context into why that is the case. We'll touch on some health and nutrition information, and then we'll dive right into versatile and meal and menu solutions, as well as some meal prep and meal planning hacks to get you and potentially those you work with into eating more lentils on a more regular basis. But first, let's start here. I think Dorothy and I have both used the term pulse perhaps already this morning. We'll start there. What are pulses? So pulses are the dry, edible seed of legumes. And they include lentils as well as chickpeas, dry beans, and dry peas. And as you can see on the chart on the screen, all pulses are considered legumes, but not all legumes are pulses. So legumes also include fresh products like fresh peas and fresh beans, as well as oil-based products like soybeans and peanuts. So we know that when we crush or grind peanuts or soybeans, we are left with an oil-based result. So that's a particular unique attribute of that category of legumes. But when you grind or crush a pulse, like a lentil or a pea or a chickpea, you get a flour-like outcome. So it's a dry flour. So that's kind of where that dry edible seed in the legume family lives. So those are called pulses. Pulses also have very unique sustainability attributes as well, which we'll touch on in just a moment. So we will dig now into how lentils are grown and why they are sustainable. So where are they grown? We'll start there in terms of Canadian production. So taking a look at the map on the screen, the orange shaded areas on the map represent the lentil growing regions in Canada. So primarily in the southern prairie region of the country, 90% of Canada's lentils are grown in the province of Saskatchewan, and Canada produces around half of the world's lentil production annually and is the world's largest exporter of lentils. Lentils are also grown in the northwestern US in places like Washington, Idaho, Montana, and North Dakota, but in much less quantity than up here in Canada. So around 70% of the lentils produced in Saskatchewan are red lentils. So that's that image at the top of the screen. They don't look brilliantly red. They're kind of brown with a titch of red, and we'll talk about what those look like split in just a few slides. And then that other 30% or so, or just under that, are green lentils. So that bottom photo there. And then a very, very small percentage of niche varieties like your black beluga lentils, your French green, your Spanish brown, et cetera, et cetera. But those, again, considered very, very niche and produced in very limited quantity. So how do lentils grow? What does this plant look like that produces this humble pulse crop? So lentils are planted in early May, generally one of the first crops that farmers put into the ground, usually after peas, if that's in their rotation. And they're harvested in mid to late August. So for those of you from Canada, you know Saskatchewan certainly gets real winter, so our growing season is relatively short. And lentils do play very well into that short growing season, so that May to August timing. The plants grow only to be around about a foot tall, so they're quite a short plant, and that makes them poor competitors for weeds and other pests. And we'll touch on that in a few slides as well. But lentils grow in these tiny little pods that you'll see in that photo on the screen. Each pod will generally have 1, 2, or 3 lentils. 1 or 2 is usually more common. 3 would be certainly less common. But so imagine these tiny little pods. There's maybe about 30 on each plant, and about 2 million or so acres of those in Saskatchewan. So that's a little bit of insight into what those plants look like, how they grow, et cetera. Now, sustainable versus regenerative. I'm sure those of you who work in the food industry have seen these terms pop up. There's always a new marketing buzzword out there in this space, but let's talk maybe and anchor our conversation in these two terms. So what do they actually mean when it comes to agriculture? So sustainable agriculture seeks to maintain and cease the degradation of the land, while regenerative agriculture seeks to restore that land, promote beneficial soil health, and provide ecosystem services. But really, at the essence, these general principles and the ways we measure them remain the same. So we'll touch on a number of different aspects of this in the coming slides. So how do lentils contribute to both this notion of sustainable and regenerative agriculture? When we discuss sustainability of a food product and how it's produced, it's really important that we assess that through the lens factoring in a number of different factors that impact sustainability. So it's important to consider all of these collectively in order to have a well-rounded view of sustainability, or a picture of sustainability when it comes to that product. So lentils are really a key component of strategies to lower the environmental impact of food consumption and production for the following reasons, which we'll detail in subsequent slides, including carbon, water, nitrogen, soil health, biodiversity, crop rotations, no-till farming, and zero waste. So we'll start with carbon. This is probably the hot button topic, certainly when it comes to agriculture as a whole. Really what the takeaway here is that lentils are net negative in carbon use when they're grown. So really this means that more carbon is actually sunk or stored or sequestered in the soil than emitted into the atmosphere while producing lentils in that year. So the earth or the soil works as what we call a carbon sink, and it pulls carbon out of the air and sequesters it into the soil. Lower emissions are required to produce lentils for a number of reasons, including nitrogen fixation, which I'll touch on in a moment, really requiring less fertilizer use in the system overall, while also reducing machinery passes to apply said fertilizer, and the widespread production of no-till farming that also really beneficially adds to this carbon story for lentils, since it's widely adopted in Western Canada. And I'll touch on what exactly that means in a moment. But really, this all contributes to this net negative carbon balance in the production of lentils. So now I already mentioned nitrogen fixation. So what exactly does that mean? Basically, pulses, including lentils, have this very unique ability to fix nitrogen, their own nitrogen, into the soil as they grow. So basically the root systems themselves form nodules that react to the bacteria in the soil, and those will create nitrogen for that plant to use while it grows. Basically, it's creating its own fertilizer. This not only reduces that amount of nitrogen fertilizer needed to grow the lentils themselves, but also increases soil health overall, adding to that organic matter and for subsequent crops grown on that land in another year. So it will produce generally enough nitrogen for it to grow, the lentils, but also retain some extra nitrogen in the soil for that crop grown in that field the next year as well. So let's talk soil health. Everything I've already mentioned impacts and improves soil health overall, but let's dive into that just a little bit deeper. So lentils grown in Canada are grown as a part of a sustainable crop rotation system of typically anywhere between 3 to 8 years, where different crops are rotated or planted on the same plot of land each year. So typically that will rotate between an oil seed like canola or flax, a cereal crop like wheat, barley, or oats, and a pulse crop. So in this case, lentils or peas or chickpeas, those can all basically be interchanged year to year on the same field of land. And the reason we do this is to create really healthy, robust organic soil and to combat and naturally combat pests like diseases, insects, etc. So basically, if you're growing the same crop on the same piece of land every single year, the insects and other pests can really easily learn what's going to be in that ground and learn how to attack it. If you're constantly switching up the crop that's grown on that piece of land, it's much, much harder for those pests to adapt quickly and learn how it could attack that crop. So by always keeping up a good mix, you're not only improving your soil health, but you're naturally combating pests like insects or disease. Other key practices exercised in conventional Western Canadian agriculture also includes the adoption of no-till farming. So no-till means that at the time of seeding, the farmer plants the seeds directly into the stubble of the previous crop. This works to keep a protective cover over the land to prevent erosion to that soil. It reduces carbon that would be expelled by the act of tilling the land with equipment and increases that organic matter in the soil from the roots and other plant material retained from the previous crop, again, contributing to that overall soil health. Previously, tilling or essentially working up the land was common practice, which left that soil in a very, very vulnerable state to be blown away. So think dirty 30s when you just saw all that topsoil being blown away in the wind. If we retain that stubble and that protective cover over the land, we're building in our protective layer. So that's no-till agriculture currently practiced, around 75% or more in terms of farms in Western Canada on the conventional side. For organic farming, this is often still a common use practice. Because they have less weed control options, it is very essential that the ground be tilled still to make room for that next crop. So the final piece I'll touch on here on sustainability is just water and waste. Water, obviously a big part of that overall sustainability story, not one we think about a lot in pulses, particularly in lentils. So lentils are a protein source with an exceptionally low water footprint. They're well adapted to semi-arid conditions and tolerate drought stress very well. So the real takeaway here is lentils are not grown under any sort of irrigation. So the only water they get in the production cycle is if Mother Nature gifts us with some rain. If they do, awesome. If not, lentils are going to perform a bit better than any other crop. They do tolerate that drought stress well. They would appreciate some water, but when you're looking at other crops in the system, your lentils and your other pulses are going to perform a little bit better under limited water situations. Finally, waste is often the low-hanging fruit when we talk about sustainability, so I'll touch on it here. Not really a big one, but it's just kind of interesting. There's really no waste in the production of lentils, so when lentils are harvested, the combine, which is pictured on the screen there, what it's doing is actually, oftentimes people think that's just dust from the dry soil being kicked up from the combine, and in some cases, to a certain extent, that may be true. But what it's really doing is shaking loose the pods, stems, and stalks from those lentil seeds at the time of harvest. And all that debris, if you will, that natural organic matter debris is then redistributed back onto the land behind the combine. So again, just adding to that robust organic soil material that's in the ground and really creating its own compost. So just touching on waste a little bit there. I think we'll put in the chat later on a link to a video that kind of puts all these practices into video format and commentated by one of our farmers. Sometimes it's just a little more interesting to listen to that information from a grower. So we'll send that link around after as well. So I'm gonna grab some water. We'll switch gears a little bit here and talk about lentils and health and nutrition. I think most people know, generally speaking, that lentils are good for them, but not everyone knows why. So let's dive into that just briefly here. So typical suggested serving size of lentils is a half cup of cooked lentils. And that provides 12 grams of protein and 8 grams of fiber and only 140 calories. Why is that important? It's really that combination of protein and fiber together, which creates that satiating effect of lentils. So that's that notion that it's going to curb your hunger, keep you full for longer, and not spike and lower aggressively your blood sugar. So that's really an option to keep if you're in food service, if you're serving food, your consumers are going to be very satisfied, and they're going to be satisfied for longer when eating a more satiating food. So whether you're creating a whole new recipe or a menu item or just adding some lentils into an existing one, this is a really easy and great way to pack quality nutrition into all of your dishes. So let's dive just a little bit deeper here and looking at lentils. Specifically compared to other protein sources, lentils are one of the highest sources of plant protein that are available to consumers on the market. In that 1/2 cup cooked serving I mentioned earlier, it actually has the same amount of protein as around 2 eggs. And in terms of fiber, that same serving size has about 3 times the amount of fiber compared to the same serving of quinoa or barley, or as much as a bowl of bran flakes. So very, very strong source of fiber. And again, as I mentioned, that combination of protein and fiber creates that satiating effect. In addition, lentils also provide other nutrients that are also found in typical animal-based proteins like seafood, meats, and poultry, like iron and zinc. And they're also a great source of potassium and folate on the nutrient side. Obviously, naturally low in fat and calories as well, naturally gluten-free if that's something of interest, and exceptionally low on the GI scale, which I'll explain here now. So I'm sure there are lots of dietitians on the webinar today, and this is fairly common, I'm assuming, to this group, but the glycemic index, and an example of part of that is on the screen right now. It's basically a scale that ranks carbohydrate-rich foods by how much they raise the blood glucose or blood sugar levels compared to standard foods. So eating foods with low glycemic index may help you to control your blood sugar levels, control cholesterol, control your appetite, and lower your risk of developing heart disease or type 2 diabetes. As you can see on this chart on the screen, lentils are very low on the GI scale. Remember, low is good in this case, demonstrating that they're a high quality carbohydrate compared to those carb sources such as, say, white rice or white potatoes. Again, contributing to that strong satiating effect and the long burn energy qualities of lentils. So dipping into I know this is a bit of an eye chart. I'm not sure how well you guys can read this on your screens here, but what we really want to focus on this slide is basically we asked, this is some consumer research we fielded in the US, but we asked consumers, what is the benefits that they feel lentils bring overall? And they actually ranked healthy, high in protein and high in fiber as top, and then of course followed by taste. Taste is king, we know, as always. But really the takeaway here is that consumers inherently in general know that these key attributes, so healthy, protein, fiber, et cetera, are linked and tied with lentils inherently. So we know not to go out and menu dishes or promote dishes based on health as the top call out. But there is a natural health halo we can see with this information that consumers are naturally associating those qualities to lentils. So if they show up in a dish, you don't need to market it as healthy. There is that inherent knowledge and understanding from consumers that that is linked to that dish already. So that's kind of what we want to demonstrate here. But now let's dive into the fun part, if you will. Let's talk about cooking. Let's talk about taste. Let's talk about how to, and dive into some of the fun applications. So we'll start here first. We'll talk about the most commonly found varieties of lentils. I touched on it when we talked production, but for the most part in Western Canada, we are producing red and green lentils, and that large majority being red. So on your screen, you'll see those same two photos of whole red and whole green lentils at the top and bottom of your screen. But we've got a new photo that's popped up, and this is probably a common image that you've seen before. These are split red lentils. So we'll walk through what these all look like and their inherent attributes here. So whole red lentils are pictured at the top. Now, I will say, oftentimes in retail or where you might find these at, say, a bulk store, they may be labeled as brown lentils. There are some labeling challenges that we have in this industry with, what visually these lentils look like or what they might be called on the farm, and they're not always the same. So you may see these called out as brown lentils. We'll call them whole reds for the purpose of the discussion. Basically, farmers either grow red or green lentils, the top or bottom photo, and how you get to that middle image is actually a secondary processing technique. So whole red lentils have their seed coat intact, and when they're cooked, they're going to hold their texture, kind of have that al dente bite to them. And as I mentioned, can be referred to in some cases as brown lentils. That middle photo there, that's what we call split red lentils. I've seen them called orange. I've seen them called salmon. We'll call them split red lentils for the sake of this presentation. So what's happened there is that's the same crop as the top photo that would be grown by a farmer. But once it's harvested and then cleaned at a processing facility, it may go to a secondary processing facility where that seed coat, so that outer exterior, has been removed, or what we call dehulled. And then the inner cotyledon, or the inside of that seed, has been split in half with a puff of air. And what this does is it exposes that brilliant bright orange inner color, and it results in a different cooking technique. So these are going to start to break down and become mushy during that cooking process. And that's what we've typically traditionally seen in applications like curries and dals from Indian culture. So that is what that product is in the middle. And then at the bottom, whole green lentils, again, about 30% of production here. It again still has its seed coat intact, and again will hold its texture when cooked. But we'll dive a little bit further into cooking. So the difference when it comes to how to cook lentils really depends on if it's whole or if it's split. Whole red and whole green lentils are going to cook up in the same amount of time and generally be used for similar applications. So it's really that split product that would be used vastly differently. So I'll talk to applications and cook time of whole versus split. So a whole lentil will cook up in about 15 to 20 minutes. We do see packaging out there in Canadian retail that suggests 40 or even 50 minutes to cook a whole lentil. You're gonna, if you follow that, unfortunately, you're going to come up with an outcome that is probably not super desirable. 15 to 20 minutes is all you need. They're going to retain a nice kind of a dente bite to them, which is what we're looking for. They're going to retain that shape and texture when cooked, so these should not be breaking down if we're cooking them under the proper time constraints. And that texture is really great to blend or replace animal protein in certain dishes. And it's a great, nice, toothy texture that works nice in grain salads or hearty bases for bowls, which we'll talk about in a second. Split red lentils, on the other hand, they're going to be cooked in a very quick 5 to 7 minutes, if that. They're going to be fully cooked very quickly, and they will start to break down and become mushy if you cook them for any longer. Having said that, there may be applications where that is the desired outcome. So if you are making a dal or a curry, you may want that more broken down texture. With this variety, it's also a great use for pureed items like dips, spreads, or hummuses. And they can also be used to naturally thicken soup, stews, and that sort of thing. So that's the general difference on the cook time and application. It's really about whether you're using that whole or split product. The color really doesn't do anything to that cook time. So I left this slide in. This is one we typically use in our food service space, but I think it outlines some of the top benefits of lentils. This is why chefs love them. This is why I love them too. But it's for a number of reasons, and these are the top 5. So versatility is one we're going to explore quite a bit in this webinar in terms of how lentils can be used in a ton of different applications for chefs across the menu and across the day parts, from breakfast, lunch to dinner and dessert into late night. Affordability, this is a big one right now. Of course, we know everything that's going on with inflation. While lentils have likely gone up in price slightly, they are not nearly going up as quickly as other proteins, and are still going to be among the most economical protein sources out there, whether it's those stocking your own kitchen at home or chefs looking at the bottom line of their menu. So satiation, we already touched on this from a health and nutrition standpoint, both if you're cooking for your family and your kids are going off to school, to you taking, lunch to work, or chefs who are trying to satisfy, hungry university students. We want to make sure that our consumers or our families are full and they're satisfied and they've got that energy that will last them throughout the day. This is really key to, especially on the food service side, for consumers to come back again, especially if they might be choosing a more plant-forward or plant-based dish. I think there's this inherent notion that I'm not going to be full if I eat that. If we're looking at satiating foods like lentils that are putting that protein with the fiber, we're going to achieve that satisfaction and hopefully repurchase in the sake of restaurants. On trends, so we'll explore many different plant-forward and global cuisines in this presentation, and lentils really inherently fit within all of those. And of course, we cannot forget taste. Taste is always king. One great thing about lentils is they're what we call a flavor sponge. So they're very neutral in taste on their own, but as you cook them, they're great at soaking up all the great flavors and seasonings of a dish. So whether it's in a bowl and it's soaking up a marinade or a sauce, or you're just choosing to cook your lentils in stock or with some aromatics, they're really great at sucking all that flavor in and helping to carry your dish. So one more slide here before we dive into concepts. I've already used the word plant forward once. This is something that we really promote here at lentils.org when we talk about lentils and food. Is really emphasizing a style of cooking that emphasizes and celebrates, but is not limited to only plant-based foods. We definitely believe in eating all types of foods. You'll hear me talk probably about, moving lentils to the center of the plate and maybe mixing up that protein ratio. When you use a lot of great protein-heavy plant-based items, you may be able to reduce the amount of animal protein on a dish. We like to call that adding meat as a garnish, so maybe in a lesser amount, and really balancing that protein play on the dish. So it's never limited to only lentils or plant-based foods. It really celebrates all and leans into flavors, spices, herbs, and that sort of thing to really carry those dishes forward. So that's kind of a notion in the background of all of the future slides we're going to look at. So different ways to eat lentils beyond soup. Let's dig right in. We are going to start with power bowls. This is one of my favorite ways to eat lentils. I don't know, there's just something about eating something in a bowl that really resonates with me myself, and it's honestly how I prefer to eat lunch every single day, in my personal opinion. So bowls are a versatile dish format that typically features vegetables, grains, and protein, either plant or animal or both, and topped with one or more flavorful sauces, and are often globally or seasonally inspired. Bowls in their essence really embody many of the trends we'll talk about here today, including healthful eating, building off of global cuisines, and we believe they're one of the strongest formats to showcase lentils while also building flavor, taste, and nutrition. So what is the appeal of power bowls? Well, first and foremost, flavor. They pack in big flavor, whether from a robust array of ingredients or the use of a great sauce really to tie it all together. They also provide balanced nutrition, ensuring that protein and good carbs combine and allow for a generous serving of produce, so a great way to get more plants into your diet. They're inherently plant forward, as I mentioned, really providing a vessel for that increased plant consumption. And they're also customizable. From a food service perspective, this is huge, a must certainly for Gen Z consumers, and appealing to all while being portable as well. So bowls are a great portable platform. Certainly coming out of COVID, the way we eat and the way we consume food is very different. Oftentimes we're taking it to go or consuming it over time in different settings. So portability is certainly key. And finally, one of the big things here is it's a way to allow for what we call safe experimentation. This means that maybe you're able to introduce a single new ingredient or a new flavor or even a new cuisine to a consumer and pair it with familiar ingredients, flavors, or cuisines to bring the consumer along to experience new food and make new food choices. So this also naturally lends into being inspired by different regions of the world and playing with different bowl ingredients, seasonings, toppings, and sauces. So kind of a great format to explore that within. So what are some examples of this? So I've got some kind of fun global cuisine examples of great ways to use lentils in bowl formats, and they can look a little different, right? So this is certainly an Indian-inspired bowl. We call it our Indian dal bowl. What this is basically a scoop of brown rice, a scoop of a really nicely seasoned red lentil dal, and then we're packing in some extra veggies with some steamed spinach, some mushrooms, some carrots, and then garnishing with some pomegranate arils on top. So again, here, the base of this bowl, very economical, and maybe we're springing for a more high value topping on this one in the terms of the pomegranates. So we can balance both that nutrition, that taste, and the food cost. Here we've got a very simple, straightforward Cobb salad bowl. So just leveraging, those typical Cobb salads you see everywhere, but just maybe adding a little bit more on the protein side. So here we've got lentils with some great cherry tomatoes, some fresh avocado, a little bit of cheese, bacon, your typical hard-boiled egg, and some romaine lettuce with a nice blue cheese ranch dressing there. I should mention as we go through, as I'm enticing you with all these recipes, these are all found at lentils.org. Everything I show you there is a recipe to back it up. So this is our coconut curry bowl, again, an Indian-inspired dish. This one we typically would serve warm, but what we've done is blended rice and lentils as the base, and then we've got some steamed broccoli and mushrooms, carrots, some coconut flakes, got a green curry sauce in this one, and then here you'll see a great example of that animal protein used as a condiment. So about 2 ounces of chicken to kind of finish that off, but certainly no lack of protein in that dish. We love leaning into Mediterranean cuisine with lentils. Inherently, lentils fit very nicely in Mediterranean diets. So this is a really nice, this is along the lines of what honestly I'll take for lunch most days. We've blended quinoa and lentils to create the base of this bowl. Packed in lots of spring mix lettuce, some cucumbers, tomatoes, red onion, a little bit of almonds, and we've got, I believe, a red pepper sauce on that one. And again, just that smaller amount of animal protein to finish it off. Here we're going in the Asian direction, another warm bowl for you today. So a warm Asian umami bowl. Here we've got, again, rice and lentils as the base, some broccoli, some shaved carrots, some mushrooms, and some edamame, which is a great additional protein source, and a smaller piece of salmon to kind of finish that one off with, I believe, a soy miso glaze on it. So now we'll take bowls and just expand a little bit into salads and side dishes now. Another very common way that we see lentils used across the menu. And I guess, why does that fit well with consumers? They're protein rich, so a great other area to pack that protein onto the menu. Certainly for consumers looking for that, but also those that may not be interested in eating animal protein. They provide that new balanced nutritional, and again, help with that cost factor. So some examples here. This is a great one. We're actually able to launch a similar dish to this on a major casual dining chain menu in the US a few months ago. This is our lentil and corn elote salad, so a spin on Mexican street corn. So lentils providing a bit more heft to this salad, alongside some grilled corn, some cotija cheese, some jalapenos, and some tahini to finish that off. So that chili lime seasoning. So a fun little twist on a salad. Here's a great side dish. So sides on menus are often a little bit boring. We've seen rice pilaf for years. How can we take that same idea and switch it up a little bit? So this is a barley and lentil base with sauteed leeks throughout, and just a light herb dressing, and a nice spin on a traditional rice pilaf. Taking that even further, this is a dish called Mujidara. It's a traditional dish in Egypt. And it's a great dish. It's essentially brown rice and lentils with deeply, deeply caramelized onions folded throughout. Our chef did a little twist on that and added some pesto and another sauce drizzled, but just on its own, it just provides a little bit more excitement into that dish and adds that really deep umami flavor of the caramelized onions. This is a fun one. I love this one. I love Southern food. These are our baked bourbon lentils. Certainly a twist on your traditional baked beans, but a really nice dish to serve either with a crusty bread or as a side dish to kind of like a barbecue based menu or picnic menu. Moving on to blends, this is a fun one. If you know me and we've chatted before, blends has been something we've been talking about for quite a while. But basically what this is the combination of plant and animal protein to extend the meat in a dish. So blends are appealing for a number of reasons, but what they really do is capitalize on consumers' desire to reduce maybe a little bit of their meat consumption and simultaneously increase their consumption of plants. And by blending animal protein with lentils, you keep that protein in the mix and also improve your fiber while moderately reducing calories and fat in the dish. By adding about a third of lentils to a typical US 100% US beef burger can also improve the sustainability of that burger by 33% and reduced its cost by, we calculated this pre-inflation, so about 25% or so. But really the exciting thing here is there's diverse applications that we can take this idea. So anything from burgers to meatballs, meatloaf, basically anything that utilizes a ground meat in it could be blended with lentils to create maybe a little bit more balanced and exciting dish. So we'll talk through some examples in a second. We did do a study comparing this blended burger to a traditional 100% beef burger. I mentioned a few of those stats a second ago, but this is just another recap of those. You can see this full study online at lentils.org/sustainability, and there's all the data to back that up. But basically, if every burger in the US was blended with lentils, you could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 8.7 million tons or reduce almost 2 million cars off of the road. That's not going to happen. We know that, but it's a great tool in the toolbox, especially right now. Again, that cost-cutting piece is key. Inflation is no joke. And from whether you're a home cook or someone running a restaurant and trying to keep food costs in check, this is a great tool that doesn't lack protein or flavor. So diving into some examples, obviously burgers are one of the main ways we see this blending happen. This is one of our burgers called a Moroccan burger. We talk about a ratio when it comes to blended burgers specifically, where we actually blend 30% lentils with 30% ground beef and then 30% roasted chopped mushrooms, which creates a really, really great burger base. And then we mix in 10% of herbs and spices to kind of take that burger around the world. So this is our Moroccan version that really packs in a lot of exciting herbs and creates a really exciting, tasty burger. And you could take that in a Spanish direction with some smoked paprika, or you could take it in an Italian direction with a bunch of oregano and maybe a Parmesan tuile as a garnish instead of a typical cheese slice, for example. So this is a great opportunity if you are in food service to look at limited time offers, take a simple burger ratio and switch it up every month to create a different concept, or look at this as a home cook and just make things a little more exciting for burger night at your home. So this is one example of that in a burger format. Here's a meatball. These are called lentil keftedes. Keftedes are a traditional Greek meatball that is formed and then lightly dusted in flour and then pan seared. So this is our version of that. The lentils here are blended with, I believe, beef and pork and a bunch of great herbs. And then we've served them here with a nice little mint yogurt to finish it off. This is a fun one. This is one of my favorite recipes. These are lentil kofta. So kofta is basically, it's a ground meat combination that traditionally would be formed around a skewer, kind of like a football, so with 3 flat sides, and then grilled over an open flame. So we've created this kofta as a lentil turkey mixture with a ton of herbs in there. Really, really tasty. And this one we've served kind of like a lettuce wrap with just a little dollop of tzatziki So really simple, easy dish, fun one that you might want to make with the kids, get them forming, grill those off, and it's a great little dinner. I love that one. This is an old recipe for way back in the day, probably almost 10 years old now. This one I make on regular rotation at my house. I just love it. It's, again, another lentil turkey mixture. Here we're using the split reds. And it's really simple. It's just sauteed up with some diced red pepper, and then added some soy sauce and some hoisin sauce in there, and optionally some nuts, and serve them in a lettuce wrap for a great little hoisin turkey lentil lettuce wrap dish. So this is one of my favorites. Definitely look it up. It comes together in like 20 minutes in one pan. Definitely an easy one for weeknight dinners. I see someone else makes that one a lot, which I love to see. That one's a winner for sure. Moving on now to plant-based crumbles. So we'll dive into these a little bit. When I say plant-based crumbles, I'm talking whole food versions of analogs. So we know these analog products are very popular right now. Everyone's talking about them, but you're paying for the brand. In many cases, they're quite expensive, and some people aren't super comfortable with the ingredient panels on those items. So you can do the same thing and same idea with whole foods. They're an alternative to those expensive branded items. Pretty simple ingredient list. You can make them at home, and they're super cross-functional. Just like those blends, they have a fit in a number of different formats. So let's explore some ideas there. First up, we've got our lentil mushroom walnut tacos. This is my favorite crumble base to make. Similarly to our burger platform or ratio, this one simply uses cooked lentils. So our whole lentils, we want that nice texture to mimic those pockets of fat and pockets of lean in animal protein. Again, we've got roasted and chopped mushrooms, and then walnut pieces, so small crumbles of walnuts. Now that in its own is a pretty neutral base. So again, you can take that flavoring component in a number of different directions. Really easy one to use is kind of a Tex-Mex Southwest taco seasoning type flavoring. And then you've got a great taco base right there. So simple, just saute it up in a pan. You can use that same taco base and combination of a crumble as a bolognese starter. So plant-based bolognese, you basically use that same lentil mushroom walnut base, add some tomato sauce and maybe some finely chopped vegetables, and you've got a plant-based bolognese, very simple and easy from that same base. Take that same base again, and we've got a great plant-based nacho topping. So again, it's mimicking that ground beef that we would put under your traditional just melt away nachos. Sprinkle that on, maybe add some diced tomato, maybe add some chives. Maybe you want to add some kind of sauce or some plant-based cheese, or maybe you add regular cheese and sour cream and you're just adding more plants to the topping. Either way, 3 really great ways to use that same really simple whole food plant-based crumble base in a number of different applications. I'll touch briefly on baking here. We won't go too much into this, but I know this one gets some people excited. So if you're familiar with black bean brownies or incorporating, say, applesauce into baking, cooked and pureed lentils can do very similar things in terms of a baking addition. So of course, adding that protein and fiber into the baking. So think your stealth health, getting more plants into your kids' lunches perhaps, and this is a great fun way to do it. But similar to incorporating applesauce, you could also cut some of the fat out of that recipe. So maybe a little bit less oil or butter required, and it really packs in the moisture, which is a great functional output of that. So a few ideas here. I love this one. Any dietitians that we've worked with in the past have likely seen this one in action. These are coconut and banana lentil energy bites. So again, cooked and pureed lentils combined with mashed ripe banana and some other things like coconut, a little bit of almond flour to give pull this one together. Coconut flour would work as well, but they really are those, traditional protein bite little snacks, great to pack in the lunch kit, bring to school, etc., and really pack in that protein and fiber throughout the day. This is my favorite one. I just picked 2 examples, but I make this all the time. These blondies are so good, you guys. Look that recipe up. They're so moist. I know everyone hates that word, but these are delicious. Great example of how the lentils really, really, really pack moisture into a dish. It doesn't dry them out. And again, you're adding that stealth health nutrition along the way. So, is this a top way I would suggest to use lentils? Probably not, but it is a fun one, a great way to get the kids involved, or if they're a little bit picky, to pack that nutrition in a sneaky way. So let's wrap up here today talking about meal prep and menu planning hacks. So some little quick tips and ideas on how to kind of ease that meal prep at home if lentils are maybe new to you or new to some clients that you work with. So first, I guess, how do we cook better lentils? Some people may cook lentils and they just cook them in water and they eat them on their own. And you know what? They're maybe not that exciting. I totally agree. We encourage people to experiment with using broth or bouillon and other aromatics in their cooking liquid. So that's a good place to start. You can also explore using different types of cooking equipment. So certainly stovetop in a pot works great, but things like rice cookers and Instant Pots also work well as well, kind of the set it and forget it approach. And you can also batch cook and meal prep for easy additions throughout the week, and I'll touch on that here. So we suggest cooking off a big batch of lentils on your meal prep day. For me, it's Sunday. I'll cook a big batch, maybe it's 4 cups, maybe it's even 6 cups. I'll portion it into 1/2 cup or 1 cup portions and either refrigerate so they can sit well in the refrigerator for up to a week or freeze for up to 3 months. So cooked lentils freeze great. We always suggest portioning them into resealable bags and laying them flat and then freezing them. That way they take up less space in the freezer and they actually defrost way faster if you freeze them flat. So a little hot tip there. How can you use those lentils throughout the week? This is a little resource. It's on our website at lentils.org that we love to follow. So here's some really easy ways if you've just cooked off a big batch of lentils on the weekend, how you can use them throughout the week. Love adding them to smoothies. So cooked lentils puree up very nicely, as we already mentioned. So add a 1/2 cup to your smoothie. And maybe if you're out of protein powder or don't have it handy, this is a great way to put that protein and fiber into your smoothie with something you already have in the fridge. Add them to tacos or anything with a ground meat addition. So Taco Tuesday, of course, either sprinkle those in with your ground meat, or maybe you plan to explore those whole food plant-based crumbles, which is fun. Wednesday, pasta night, add those into your pasta sauce. It doesn't need to be a big, long recipe. You can throw lentils in with a jarred tomato sauce and have a great protein addition to your weekly pasta. Thursday, easy, protein-rich topper to your salad. Take those for lunches, or maybe you're having a salad for dinner. Friday, we can make maybe homemade, maybe it's burger night, so we can incorporate into those homemade burger patties. Saturday, we're taking more time for dinner. Maybe you mix those into your omelet or with your scrambled eggs. And then maybe for a bonus on the weekend, you're doing some baking and you can use those leftover lentils pureed into the batter. So just some ideas on how you can go through your week, meal planning and prepping and just incorporating as you go. And finally, this is my last slide here today. I just want to touch on some lentil products at retail. So we talked about whole lentils here today. I don't want to ignore that there are lentil ingredients out there like lentil flour, used commonly in many products at the grocery store, from puffed and roasted or extruded snack foods, crackers, pasta products, and more. Here's a few examples up on the screen that I do frequently see across Canada. There are many, many more, and other pulses that play in these spaces as well. But if you're at the grocery store and happen to see these, also a great way to eat your locally grown pulses, including lentils. So I will wrap things up here. Again, all the recipes I talked about and many of the other resources are available online at lentils.org. And we will pause now, I think, for some questions.
Thanks, Amber. That was great. And we'll put the link up to the lentils.org recipe page in the
Awesome.
chat. But so much great information, from the whole sustainability side to the health benefits to all those yummy looking recipes. That food photography is gorgeous. Love it.
Thank you.
I'm definitely going to try the, what was it? The baked bourbon lentils. That sounds really good.
That's a great one.
Yeah. While
So
we're waiting to see if we have any questions, I was just going to say that Canada only started growing lentils in the 1970s, and now we're one of the leading exporters of lentils. So that's a really kind of cool Canadian food farm story, I think.
absolutely.
But I remember I've been around a little longer than you have, and I remember when we first started growing them, and even in the 90s, when I one of my first projects as a home economist was working on a cookbook for different pulse crops to encourage people to eat them, and we ran a recipe contest, and there was some absolutely terrible recipes that came in, and I think as people started sort of looking globally at how different cultures were eating them, that really gave us a lot of inspiration. But you've given us so many more ideas beyond that today, so thank you for that. I was going to ask you, of all these kind of new ideas, what do you see out there that are sort of most popular with consumers?
Yeah, I mean, if you'd ask consumers, and we actually have the research, soup is top of mind. That's what people know lentils in and most often consume them in and are most comfortable consuming them in, quite honestly. But there is so much more we can do. And from a food service perspective and from a home cook perspective, you want to be able to use the ingredients in your pantry in a number of different places, whether that's at home or in the restaurant. Cross utilization is key. So I think, one of the really easy entry points is into the salad, side dishes, or bowl category. They're approachable. It's not too out there. It plays nicely into if you've got a grain base or a grain side already. In many cases, depending on the grain you're using, you can actually cook them together in the same pot, in the same liquid. Lentils and barley, for example, cook up in very similar time frames from a whole perspective. So it doesn't have to be complicated either. But I think that salad or bowl category is really that next big opportunity, I believe, and not too much of a stretch from a consumer understanding standpoint.
Yeah, and so much versatility and flexibility with those as well.
Yeah.
We do have a question here from Nita. Whoops. Let me grab the right one here. She also commented before too that using a tea bag in the water for some dishes adds some great flavor, but she's wondering if we have any, or if you have any tips for school nutrition programs. I think she's going to be talking to a group coming up.
Great. Yeah, I mean, that's a big question and a broad question, but certainly here in Canada, those programs differ in terms of how vast they are. But we do have some good ideas on our website that might play nicely there. Things like just well-seasoned side dishes, but also we've got some great plant-based or blended sloppy joe recipes, for example. When you do hit our website at lentils.org and go to recipes, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, there is a kid-friendly button for some very, approachable, easy to handle type applications that might play really nicely into programs like that. I think dips are kind of fun too. I think kids are getting more comfortable with things like hummus. So how do we take that concept into some different directions as a really nice entry point that's not too scary or out there for kids? With your vegetables and aligning them that way. But again, in school nutrition, ready products are also really important, right? So maybe lentil pasta is a great product to bring in some more plants into a school menu that doesn't really change their operations too much at all either.
Great ideas. And I know also on your website, there's a lot of chefs and dietitians I can see that are on the webinar today. You have a learning hub, and I think there's a course on there called Lentils and Application that goes even a step further with some ideas, and we can put a link in the chat for that if people want to go through that course and get some more ideas.
That'd be great. Thanks, Dorothy, for that plug. So yeah, we've got a course mainly for food service chefs, but if there are dietitians and other team members that play in that food service space, especially, it is a 9-module course certified through the American Culinary Federation that is completely free online and self-paced and takes you through a number of cooking demonstrations and dives into every one of the applications we touched on here today with a food service chef taking you through how to to make that happen, how to operationalize it, and linking it up to consumer insights along the way. So if you are interested in that, that is at lentils.org/learning.
I'm about halfway through it, and I saw there was one for pickling lentils, and I thought that was a really cool idea as well.
Yeah, we get a little crazy. We go into roasting, frying, pickled, all the fun things that make chefs excited. So, oh, sorry, I see.
Yeah,
at the bottom
there's
of the
another
screen.
question here from Susan. Do lentils require different farm equipment for planting and harvesting?
Yeah, so it depends certainly where you are in the world. In Western Canada, we are able to utilize the same seeder and harvester that we would for other crops traditionally grown in our area. There is just an addition to the combine head. So when for lentils and for other pulse crops, because they're so short, there's an attachment called a flex header that gets added to the front of that combine, especially as the plants start to dry down at harvest. They kind of, as things dry, they kind of get smaller, right? So that flex header is able to float along the contours of the ground and follow it very closely to pick up those very kind of short plants compared to, wheat and canola that are quite a bit taller. So that flex header is added, but other than that, the same machinery in general is utilized in Western Canada to other crops.
Good, thanks. And as you mentioned too, on Canadian Food Focus, we have an article about how lentils are growing, and it's really an interview with a Saskatchewan lentil farmer named Corey Lowson and his son. And in there's also a video to go along with it, so you can check that out. We'll put a link to that in the chat as well. What other questions do we have here? Heather is wondering if you might have some tips to get consumers interested in lentils. RDs get excited, but consumers don't seem to get as excited.
Yeah, great question. And I think safe experimentation is one of those biggest things. So how do you build a dish that consumers are familiar with and love already? And maybe lentils are that one foreign item in it. So maybe it's in a bowl, or like something common like a niçoise salad, and you're just including lentils in there and blending into the grains, or on a blend side, maybe it's blended into a ground meat application. But again, pairing them, I think, with something that is known and loved by consumers already, and it being maybe the only thing a little out there is how we usually suggest starting to introduce them. And that should hopefully lean to becoming more familiar, enjoying them, and maybe being more adventurous at their next step.
There was a great picture of that Cobb salad too.
Yeah, very down the middle, right? Like approachable. Maybe there's just one thing in there that's a little bit different, but they love everything else in the dish.
We did have a couple of kind of questions about, can people get the slides from this presentation, and whether or not we'll be sharing the recording, and we will be sending that out in an email as a follow-up. But also Alka was asking if they were able to order any recipe booklets for distribution.
Yeah, great question. I know many of you know us for doing that in the past. We are no longer printing and mailing recipe books anymore, but you have free range of our website, whether you want to print or save or use recipes individually or previously prepared booklets. You're free to do that on your own, but we just don't print and mail those anymore.
And then Susan asked if, and you kind of just touched on this, if they can use the information from lentils.org in social media or the dietitians in their practice.
Yeah, absolutely. You're free to share anything. Certainly link to our website, and it'll pull in our credentials anyways, so we get recognized. But yeah, we encourage you to share anything and everything. And in terms of the course, lentils.org/learning is where the course is found. There's a little description, but it's completely free. It'll ask you to build a profile just so that you can save your progress. But you can find all the information about that just at lentils.org/learning.
Maybe Angela, who's helping us behind the scenes, can post that in the link in the chat again. I don't see any more questions, and we're kind of getting up to the hour. So thanks, Amber, so much for this. It was a great presentation, and we so appreciate your time and expertise. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having me, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Before everybody runs, though, we wanted to let you know and encourage you to sign up for our monthly newsletter, Great Food Grown Here, our newsletter. We'll put a link in the chat again, so you can sign up for that. It features recent articles, videos, recipes, and information about upcoming webinars and our new podcast as well. So check that out. And speaking of our podcast, we just started this in February. It's called Ask a Farmer, and our farmer host, Quentin Monchuk, talks to different experts. I'm sure you recognize some of those. Oh, I see, Sue, we've got your name wrong there. Talks to different experts in the food industry and answers questions about the food system. So check that out. We'll put a link to that in the chat as well. And of course, follow us on social media at CDN Food Focus. And if you have any questions or ideas for webinars or podcasts, let us know. And again, thanks so much. Have a great day, and we'll see you again. Bye.